Hi everyone, I'm Katie. I'm here with Christine from Benchflower Bakers, and today I'm going to show you how to make buttermilk biscuits, which is one of our most popular items at Benchflower Bakers, but it's also really fun and easy to make at home, so I think it should be a fun quarantine activity to try while you're at home waiting for the ability to come and see our beautiful new bakery. Biscuits are a pretty straightforward thing. They start with about 3.5 cups of flour. And when you make biscuits, what you're basically doing is layering flour and butter, and that creates all the wonderful layers and flakiness that you expect from a biscuit. And then you use buttermilk to hold it together and to add some sort of sour tanginess and complexity to the flavor. And then there's also a little bit of leavener. In this case, we're using both baking powder and baking soda to make it rise so they get fluffy. So let's get started. The process here is to start with just regular all-purpose flour, 3.5 cups. I know that there's been kind of a run on flour during quarantine, but I think most of the stores are restocked now. And if you can't find all-purpose flour, you can often try it with bread flour or other things. It might just be a little bit denser as a final product. So we're starting, like I said, with 3.5 cups of flour, and then we're going to add 1 teaspoon of sugar. To that right here, 2 teaspoons of kosher salt, we are going to do 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder. It's a good practice when you're baking to always use the largest sized measuring spoon that is correct for the amount that you're doing. It just gets more accurate measurements. Okay, so I'm just going to physically mix all these dry ingredients together, but I'm just going to wait for a second so I don't dirty my hands before I cut up the butter. So when you're making biscuits or pie crust, if you've ever made either of those from home or from scratch at home, you're going to start with cold butter. Ideally, you want it to be really fresh right out of your fridge or even the freezer if you have time to put it in the freezer and let it get really cold. And you're going to want to break it up into chunks. So I like to sort of start by slicing them like this. And then break them down even a little bit more. And this, I don't know if you can see this, but this is like a really soft, wonderful butter. This is from Brook Dairy, which is the company that we get all of our dairy from. It's a local New York dairy, and they make really, really wonderful products. If you buy European cultured butter at the store, it might have this same sort of really soft texture. But a sort of more traditional American style butter might be a little bit less soft. You'll get a great result either way, but just in case that looks a little different from what you're used to. So you can see I'm kind of breaking this up into like smaller pieces, and it's even smoother if you do it using this bench scraper like I started off with. And then the slickest way to do it like that. And then, so once your butter is in chunks, these are all really as you can see, they're pretty loose shapes, they're not all the same size, and that's because I'm going to keep breaking them down once they're in the dry ingredients, so it doesn't have to be perfect right away. So I'm back here to these dry ingredients. I'm going to mix all of this in just to make sure that the leaveners and the sugar and the salt are mixed into the flour. And then I'm going to take the butter, and I like to sort of make sure that each little piece gets a little bit coated in butter, just so that you don't get any weird, all of this gets stuck together or something. So I'm just knocking them in here. And then what we're going to start to do is we want to basically start to break the butter down into the dry ingredients. So we're not trying to mix it like if you're making a cookie or a cake where you're trying to get the butter to be like, or the dry ingredients to be fully incorporated into the butter. You're trying to, it's kind of like concrete. You're looking for pieces of butter mixed into the dry ingredients. A lot of recipes will say, if you're looking at recipes for either pie crust or biscuits, they'll say pea-sized chunks of butter. And I guess a pea-sized chunk would be like that much. That's a little small, actually. I like to think of it more like a dime-sized, but not quite so flat. And then again, like different sizes are kind of okay. And it'll all come together in a minute. This looks really dry right now, and that's fine. That's how it's supposed to look. Get the rest of this butter here. And then I always do this, I'm really slow at this. This is not I'm not showing my professional baker side here because I take my sweet time when breaking my butter down. And it's also really soothing. I think we all need like soothing baking activities right now, at least I do. So take your time with it, feel the greasiness of the butter breaking down onto your hands, feel the way that the flour and the butter combine to create like a paste that sticks to your hands. It's just really nice to like feel baking in your hands instead of using a tool. This is one of the fun things about making pie crust or making buttermilk biscuits, is that it's actually even better to do it by hand in a lot of cases than it is to do it in a machine, because you get a better result. You get, you get like, if you do this in a food processor, for example, which is how a lot of people do it, the butter will break down into even smaller than pea-sized chunks, and then you lose a lot of that wonderful flakiness that we're aiming for. Okay, so you can see I'm trying to like press this into here so that it gets a little bit incorporated, but not fully incorporated. So I think I don't see any large chunks in here anymore. So that's sort of what I'm doing when I run my fingers through it. I'm like searching for large chunks of butter. But I think most of them have been pretty broken down at this point. Okay, so yeah. So at this point, what's next is you're gonna wanna add the buttermilk. So today we're using 1 cup of buttermilk. And I wanna talk a little bit about buttermilk in general and what you can do as alternatives if you, for example, if you can't find buttermilk in your grocery store, or maybe you just don't want to buy a container of buttermilk special just to make biscuits, though it makes really great pancakes too, so there's no harm in buying it. You can always use a different kind of milk, ideally like whole milk and or cream, like a half and half mixed with whole milk. I think kind of approximates the texture best. And then you can add some sort of acid, so either lemon juice or like an unflavored vinegar or something like that. And that will slightly curdle your milk, but it will also give it that tanginess, and it will give it some of the buttermilk like flavor and texture. And you can Google that and it'll give you like good ratios. And then again, on the question of like what fat percentage, because we're using this really awesome local dairy, it's going to be a little bit thicker, I think, than most of the buttermilk you would find in stores. So just do it by feel. Don't be obsessed with matching our recipe exactly. So this is 1 cup, I think. And I'm just going to pour it right in, sort of loose. I'm going to leave a little aside just so that I don't overdo it, because like I said, it's by feel, not by measurement. I'm going to start mixing it in. So I'm basically just trying to incorporate it without getting it all over my hands. If I just stuck my hand right in the buttermilk, that's what would have happened. But also I'm trying to mix it up while still preserving those chunks of butter that I did before. And I don't think I made it clear. The reason that we're preserving the chunks of butter is that when you cook the biscuit, those chunks of butter turn into flakiness. Whether it's a biscuit or a pie crust, what happens is you end up with layers of flour, butter, flour, butter, flour, butter, and then the butter cooks in the oven and melts, and it turns, and then the layers of flour in between turn into flakes. But if you break your butter down too much, you get something that's like less flaky and more rock-like, more like a scone, or more like I don't know, like a shortbread crust, for example. If you were making pie crust and you accidentally like overdid it, it wouldn't really feel like a flaky pie crust. It would start to feel like something else. So I'm just trying to get this off the sides. And then, yeah, so this is too dry. You can see that's pretty obvious. So I'm going to keep adding this milk that I set aside. And the goal here is that you want it to be like tacky, but not sticking to your hand. So we're trying to get for like having it all come together in a ball, but not be like wet to the touch, essentially. So I think, for example, I'm probably going to need a little bit more. So you can see I'm kind of like squeezing it together to try to see if it holds together. And you can see it's definitely not there yet. So put that in. And then I'll measure just so that you guys can see how much I end up using. I'm going to measure out a half cup. I almost certainly won't use all of that, but that's just for reference. Oh, and one thing that's good to know is that if you want to make this a flavored biscuit where you put, for example, scallions or seeds or something tasty in there, you generally want to add it at this step, like at the same time that you're adding the milk, so that it gets like incorporated evenly. Okay, so now we're starting to look like biscuits. When I squeeze it, it's still not quite holding together, so I'm going to add just a little bit more, hopefully to get there. I guess the big thing that people put in biscuits, right, is like cheddar and chives and things like that. Cheese is really nice in biscuits, but I'm really partial to a sweet. I mean, I'm just like a sweet freak, so I'm always like putting jam on them on biscuits. So sorry, my bowl popped. That's what that really loud noise was. So yeah, so I like to make a plain biscuit, so I can put jam on it without like the weirdness of like scallions and blueberry jam or whatever. So this is starting to look like dough. Ooh, sorry. Basically you want it to hold together, but you don't want, well, my hands are dirty because I've been working this the whole time, but if you like put your hand on it, you wouldn't want dough to come up away. You want it to be, I think the word they use is like tacky, but not sticky, is generally how that's referred to. And I'm being a little neurotic right now, making sure I pick up all these little pieces, but you don't really have to be. And yeah, so now we're going to be moving on to the rolling stage. Okay, so I finished pushing this dough all together. And yeah, now you can see it's kind of, I'm able to hold it as one big thing. It's not like falling apart in my hands, but it's also not going to stick to my hands when I touch it. So that's kind of what you're aiming for. At this point, you can either chill it if you want to take a break for whatever reason, like if you want to do this the night before and then make them for breakfast the next morning, you can do that so they're fresh. But next step is to flour your counter with some bench flour, as the name would indicate, like this, so that it doesn't stick. I like to kind of make sure it's like, that was like kind of a chunk so that it's even. And then you're gonna put your dough down. And if you're gonna wanna roll it out too. I'm gonna use this cookie cutter to make them. So I'm gonna try to aim for slightly shorter than my cookie cutter, which is probably like 3/4 of an inch. Obviously you don't need an actual cookie cutter to do this. You can just use a cup or even just like a freehand knife if you want to do that. Or even there's like, people just do drop biscuits where you just kind of like take a little chunk and put it down. But if you use a cookie cutter or like a cup, it just looks really nice. And I'm going to use a rolling pin to do this, but if you don't have a rolling pin, I mean, first of all, you could just pat it flat. Like it doesn't have to be perfectly flat like a rolling pin would get it. Or you can just use like a bottle or something round or something like in this shape. But I have this really nice rolling pin here. So I'm just trying to do it evenly. So I like it to keep all of these little edges without losing them. Like if you like roll it out just wildly, you you lose all the nice edges. And I'm going to use that as my guide. It's still a little tall over here, but maybe kind of the right height over there. So I'm going to push this side out a little bit more. And this dough is like pretty easy to work with. So for example, like I kind of made this section a little too short, so I'm just going to kind of push it back in, and it kind of like evens everything out and makes it really easy to adjust and make it the right height that you want, so that they all look the same, or they all, and you know, it's not just looking the same. If they're all the same height, they all bake at the same at the same time, in the same length of time. So you can see now it's like a little bit shorter than my cookie cutter, which is what I'm aiming for. And so I'm gonna start slicing them out. You can always kind of dip, especially if you're using something that's closed at the top. Because this is open, it's really easy to cut, but if you were to use like a cup like this, it sometimes gets like stuck in there, so just make sure you flour the tool that you're using. And I'm gonna kind of go around the edge so as not to waste, or so to waste as little as possible. And I'm gonna put them right here on this cookie sheet. Some kind of paper, or like one of those silicone mats if you have them or something, is always a good idea when you're baking cookies, biscuits, etc., so they don't stick to your sheet. But I know a lot of people, at least I'm definitely like trying to go outside as little as possible. If I don't have one thing, I'm not like going out just to get it right now. So you can always just like butter or flour your tray so that things don't stick to it, whether it's cookies or biscuits or whatever. So I think I'm gonna get an odd number from this. I'm gonna get 7. And then you can also always like press the scraps together, and the last one, if you do press your scraps together into like one last biscuit, this last one won't be as like perfect, right? Because you're basically like breaking down, like I was talking about how you want to keep all of that flour or all that butter in those big chunks and keep it from getting warm. This now, as I'm like mashing it in front of you, first of all, I'm adding all this flour that was here, so the ratio is different, but then additionally, all of that butter is now sort of like melting or like getting more incorporated. So these are less perfect, but they're definitely still edible. Maybe this is just not the one you want to gram. If you're baking for the gram, which, let's be real, we're baking to eat and to gram in many cases. Okay, so we can get another 2 out of this, easy. This one's a little misshapen, but that's okay. So got a nice arrangement of 9 biscuits right here. And the last thing you want to do before you put your biscuits in the oven, well, like even kind of before you get to this step, you're going to want to preheat your oven to 350. And you're going to bake them first in for 10 minutes, and then you're going to want to probably twist your tray around, because most people's ovens are not even. The ones in the back are going to get more or less hot depending on how your oven is, the heat is distributed. And then you're going to want to egg wash them, which gets them that nice golden brown color that you expect from biscuits. If you don't, they just kind of have this like kind of dull tan brown look. They're not shiny and they're not quite as golden, but they taste the same really. And if you don't have a brush, I've made many biscuits and pie crusts in kitchens where I don't have a brush, and maybe it's a little gross, so I'm going to do it when I'm on my last one, but you can literally just stick your hands right in the egg and just like smush it along, and it's fine. And actually this one is really pretty. You can see right here all of those layers, and that's one of the nice things about using a cutter to cut it instead of just doing like a drop biscuit style, is that when you cut straight down through them, you get to see all those wonderful layers, and they bake up, it rises up really nicely, and all the layers get really flaky and delicious. So yeah, here we go. They are ready to go in the oven. And yeah, I didn't forget anything, so they're ready to go in the oven. Yeah, and like I said, it'll be 10 minutes on one side, flip it around for probably 8 to 15 minutes. I know that's kind of a wide range. But what you're looking for is both a golden brown on the top. That's the easiest to see. But also before you get confident that they're done and pull them out and take a look. If the bottom is brown too, that means that you've gotten the whole thing is cooked through, and you want it to feel light in your hand. So uncooked dough, whether it's bread or biscuits or anything like that, it feels heavy because of all the water in it. But the water is going to bake off in the oven and turn into steam, and then it gets fluffy, it gets light and airy and tasty, and it feels light in your hand, and that's how you know it's done. And yeah, so here we have some that we baked earlier today, so you can see what they look like when they're done. And yeah, so for example, I think you can actually even see, so this one is one that was made with scraps at the end, so it's not quite as perfect as this other one, but it's still going to be absolutely delicious. You should absolutely not just throw those scraps away. And so you can see this is the part here that had the egg wash, so it's got that you can see the color change from where the egg wash was to where it isn't. And it's nice and golden brown on the top. It has some nice browning on the bottom. You can kind of hear that it's hollow, which means that it's done, and it feels really light. So yeah, so I'm going to break this one apart so you can see what it looks like on the inside. It's got all of these layers, right? So that flakes off like that. This one flakes off you can see the ways in which they break apart are it's following patterns of where there were chunks of butter in it. And those are creating those easy breaking points. And it makes it really light and fluffy and tasty. So thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it. We can't wait to see you guys again at the next craft fair. It's such a wonderful place to be, to share these baked goods with you, and we miss it so much. I hope you stay safe. I hope you get to bake some things on your own. I hope you get to enjoy some of Christine's wonderful baked goods picked up here at the bakery on 25th Avenue, or maybe delivered. And then, yeah, hope to see you again. Stay safe, stay healthy.